Hey there, this is Mark Percival with Formulated Automation. I'm going to go through a quick screencast here on using Robot Framework to quickly debug something. If you're in Robot Framework, sometimes these errors can happen. I mean, maybe you misnamed a variable, and if that's the case, then typically the task is going to fail, and you'll get a notice on your command line that the task has failed. At which point, it's up to you to debug it. A lot of times, there's a situation where you kind of want to just pause to see what's going on. You can obviously use the dialogues library and pause at any point in the script normally, but in this case, I'm going to show you how to use the robot framework to pause only if there is a error in the execution. So let's quickly go over the robot I've written here. Very simple robot. It just goes to Bing. We'll see. We'll go down here and just see the full task. Search Bing, open Bing, perform search, and then it searches for our company, Formulated Automation, our GitHub, and then it will, at that point, close. Now, if you'll notice here, I've commented out the correct way to do this query. In this case, I've called it search box, when in reality, the name of the input field is actually Q. So this will actually fail. So if I run this, it's going to fail, and if I did this in, without any debugging, it would just fail, and on the command line, you see the task failure, and there would be a log that I could go through and try to figure out what happened. But, as is the case with debugging, sometimes I actually want to stop where it's failing, just pause there only if it fails, and then I want to see what actually happened. Or I want to be able to at least take a look at the browser and see maybe I messed something up. So the critical thing here, though, is, if there's a failure and I'm not in production, I want this to happen. But if I'm in production, I typically don't want to pause anywhere. I'd like that script to go ahead and fail, and then I'll have some report somewhere else that will say that script failed, and I'll go in to debug it then. But in production, I don't want something happening where a dialog pops up and the task never exits. So in this case, I'm going to specifically make sure that we don't actually debug unless the environment variable, here it is, robot debug, is set to true. So let's walk through this script really quickly, and I will kind of go through how it works. We'll see it work in action, and then in the next follow-up screencast, we're going to go into doing this with a little bit more powerful tool like Python debug, PDB. So let's look at these lines. First off, just to be clear, this is the teardown actions that's happening. This is listed at the top of the script, the robot script suite teardown. In this case, no matter what happens with this script, pass or fail, this teardown gets run. And the reason is basically closing all the browsers is the most important piece, but now we've added some things to this. We've said, let's look at if there's an environment variable called robot debug first off. By default, it will be set to false, but if it's set to true, if I pass it in, then we're going to set that debug, and then this is the key, this is the key piece of code here. Run keyword if, debug is set to true, so that means we're in development, and suite status is set to fail. Now, this is the kind of the magic piece here. If suite status is set to fail, it means that a task somewhere along the lines has failed. And what we know is if Robot Framework fails at any point, it automatically is going to stop the script, and in this case, run the teardown. And so where this teardown happens is going to be at the point of failure. So if that's the case and it fails, then we pause for debug. And that's just a keyword I wrote down here that just does pause execution, passes some basic information to it so we know what's going on. Pause for execution due to failure, click OK to continue, and the way that dialog works is when I click OK, it will continue, and the script will exit at that point. So let's watch this fail. I'm going to go down here and watch the command line, because the important thing here is I'm setting, and this is in Windows, so if you're in Linux or Mac, there's going to be a different way to set this, and that's in the GitHub documentation. But in this case, I'm setting environment variable robot debug to true, and then semicolon, and I'm running robot with the normal, passing in the output directory and the current directory. So let's run this. It's going to open up Bing. We're going to see Bing, and it's going to, hopefully, there we go. Let me move this in. Pause execution due to failure, click OK to continue. Now let's go back to the source code. We're paused right here. And if you look down here, search Bing, element locator name search box not found. So we can actually look here and see what the error is before we go back into the pause section. Now here we're paused in this browser. Now let's we can right click on this and we can actually inspect it. And in that inspection, we can see what's the name of it? Oh, I got it wrong. The name is actually just Q. It's not search box. So in this case, I now know what the error is and I can go correct that, but let's just go ahead and continue with the execution so that it fully tears down the script. We'll hit OK. We'll go back to here, As you can see, it failed, and we had one critical task, one pass, one failed. So we still have the same output as before. We still are able to debug this, but now in this case, we were actually able to pause execution at the point that it failed and kind of figure out what was going on our own. So that's a quick, simple way of doing this in Robot Framework, not dropping to Python, just very simple. These are all Robot Framework keywords, things like get environment variable, that comes from the operating system library. Pause execution, that comes from dialogues. And that's really it. Run keyword if is part of the standard library. And then we're just, again, looking to see if we're in debug mode because we don't want this to happen in production. And we are looking to see if there is a sweet status set to fail, which means that a task has failed. And in that case only, then we run pause for debug. So this wouldn't run in production, which is the idea. So that's the basic gist of it. Feel free to look at the code. It's going to be on GitHub, and we're going to have a part 2 coming up right after this that's going to basically list how to do this, but on the Python side using PDB. And that's going to be a lot more powerful. Obviously, with this, you're fairly limited to just looking at where the script failed. With PDB, you're actually going to be able to go in, look at environment variables, look at variables, set those variables, do all kinds of things, anything you would normally be able to do in Python, and then continue the script, just like a normal debugger.